is ask David, tell us about your background, David. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
See, born in Alaska, grew up all over the world, so Air Force brat. Yeah, that's about it, you know. A little bit of 2 years everywhere. So,
Where did you spend most of your younger days?
I'd say formative years were Southern California. High school was Southern California. First year of college was Southern California. Well, 2 years of college in Southern California. Yeah. That's probably what if I were to call a place other than where I live now, Vermont, home, that would definitely be it. So.
How did you get started with British sports cars?
Well, my dad owned a 61 TR3 that we had for forever. And when I was, I don't know, I was probably 14 and was already bugging him about a car and, you know, etc. Even though I was not old enough to legally drive, obviously. And on my 15th birthday, he took me out to the garage and presented me with a Morris Minor 1000 with the engine sitting in the back seat, a box of tools and the manual, and with the instruction that when I got it running, I could have it. And when I inquired about whether he was going to render assistance, the answer was no. So that's kind of how I got going. I got going by being around him and working on him, and probably like most of you guys, one of them led to another one and another one, and so I've owned it, boy, over the years, a lot, a lot. Some pretty exotic ones and some, you know, some not so exotic. So, yeah.
Any Healys in that group?
I have. The story was, as a younger man, kind of a guy, I happened to have the opportunity to pick up a Mark II Jag for not hardly any money. It had been a flood victim, and drug it home and got it going, and etc. And was visiting a restorer friend of mine who apparently always coveted Mark IIs, and inquired whether I was going to sell it, and I said I hadn't really thought about it, and he had just finished restoring a Bug Eye, which it's almost exactly like Peter's. I mean, exactly. Yellow, red, etc. Pretty amazing little car. And Bill Swenson swapped me straight up. We traded cars. And that was the first Healy. And then I owned a 3000, a Mark I, an early one. Not for too long. It was a fun car. But my bent's more towards performance stuff. So most of the British sports cars, well, they didn't spend a long time in my in my garage.
You ever do any competition driving?
Did a little bit. My first competition car was actually a Mini, which was great because I lived about 3 miles from Riverside, and with the exception of turns 1 and 2, you could basically mat it and drive it around the track. It was pretty fun. You really didn't need the brakes for much except stopping to get out. So yeah, it was my first one. I hill climbed the TR3 for a little while. That was actually my first wreck. I flipped it, put it on its lid. So yeah, not a lot. A little bit here and there.
About the Bug Eye, did you ever drive that in competition?
I did, H Production. Yeah, I didn't stay racing too long with that one. Kind of by then, SCCA was really starting to get pretty serious, and unless you had real money, you couldn't really compete. You know, and I like to win, so It didn't last long. It didn't last long, but it was a fun car. It was, you know, yeah, it was a fun car. I enjoyed it.
So what did you do after high school?
High school, I had a year college, and then I went off to the service. Yeah, and came back, went back to school, and my summer job after I transferred to Arizona State, I worked for Tom Jackson, who you guys would recognize as half of Barrett Jackson. Yeah, and those were the days when, you know, the auction wasn't really a thing. They were just, Tom Barrett and Russ were friends, and it was an old time restoration shop. You know, you learned how to do everything. I learned body work there and body prep, painting cars, did a bunch of mechanical stuff. Yeah, I spent almost 3 years there.
What kind of cars did they have that go through the shop at that time?
Oh my God. Probably what we would consider classics today. You know, I worked on Hitler's 540K. That was kind of a fun car. 39 Delahaye. You know, more towards traditional classics, not too much into sports stuff. But it was a lot of fun. It was bloody hard work. But especially when you get asked to do sandblasting and you throw the suit on and it's 104 outside. So I was thinner then.
Is that the only auto-related job you had?
No, I've worked in a couple of different resto shops, and I sold cars. I've worked on cars. Yeah. No, pretty much a little bit of everything.
What was the best one of those jobs you had?
Best job, I'd say working for Russ was probably the best car-related job I had. Brian, his son, was the guy who ran the shop, and Brian's since passed on. But you know, you couldn't have a better mentor. He was a great teacher. I learned a ton working with him. He was really tolerant when I did idiotic things, which was pretty regularly. So that was probably the best one I ever had. Learned the most and had the most fun. Yeah.
How about the worst one of those?
Selling cars sucks. It's just the worst. It was the worst, but it was a gig, and you know, it paid you if you were good at it and good enough at it. It paid pretty decently, and I worked for some real characters. Oh my God, that was selling cars. When I was selling cars, was back in the days of the Wild West. You know, they were still wasn't a lot of regulation, wasn't a lot of rules. A lot of the guys sold. Let's see, Toyotas and Mazda, Peugeot, a couple other odd brands here and there. And back in those days, you know, it wasn't factory stores. You know, most of these were, you know, dealerships that had 3 or 4 brands in them and populated largely by ex-GM sales guys. And it was crazy stuff.
Was this in Phoenix or Southern California or where?
Colorado.
Colorado,
Boulder. Yeah. I worked up there I worked for Lions Toyota for a while. I was trying to think of the name of the dealership that sold the Peugeots and the Mazdas. I couldn't remember it. But yeah, that was probably the worst job.
Did you ever get fired?
No, I didn't get fired, but not that I shouldn't have been. I got close a couple times. So I got close a couple times. One of the dealers I worked in had a Peugeot 604 on the floor, and I think it'd been there for a couple of years. It was that's for, if you don't know French cars, that's sort of the deluxe, kind of the Mercedes competitor. The 604 was the top end at that time. And I had a guy come in, looked at the car and said, I want to buy it. And well, that's awesome. And went into the little sales cubby and started filling out the paperwork, and he wanted to pay for the car right there. And so I get everything done. I was getting ready to get up, and he just says, you know, just one more thing. And okay, sure. He said, I'd like a set of floor mats. No problem. So I take the deal into the sales manager's name, who is, and you can't make this stuff up, Harvey Frisbee. Harvey was this little round Irish guy, and you can see him right now. Gray slacks that are too long, white shirt, belly hanging over it, ties too long, not too much red hair left on his head. And I put the deal in front of him, and he took his pen and he crossed out the mats because I put them in for zero, for nothing. And he said, no. He said, charge him. The car's been there for 2 years. Of course, you know, and this is like a full commission. So this is a big number for me. This is like probably my whole month, right in front of me. And he wouldn't bend on the floor mats. And the guy was paying full pop for the car. So I really didn't know what to do. So I went back in and told the guy, you know, the sales guy, you know, the manager said, I can't give you the mats. And he starts to get up to leave. And I'm, you know, shit, I'm watching like, you know, $1,000 walk out the door here, and I'm freaking out. And I said, I'll take care of it. So I ended up making the deal, and I actually went back to parts and got the floor mats and pulled out the money. I paid for the floor mats myself just to get the deal rolling across the floor. Harvey went ballistic. And when he got mad, it was the coolest thing, because he turned the most crazy shade of red. I really thought the guy was going to explode. But I made the deal and rolled the car. And that's all you needed to do. And anyway, it was a cool job. You learn to, if you never sold cars before, you learn to think on your feet. And so good experience, but the job sucked.
Didn't you tell me something about those car mats weren't part of the parts department anyway?
They were not, but you know, hey. So
If I
but they were
remember
liberated, and they got in the car, and that's all that really mattered.
If I remember the story correctly, didn't the mats come standard in those cars, and
They did, but they always took them out.
they didn't charge people extra?
There you go. They always took them out of the car when they arrived, among other somewhat. You probably couldn't do that stuff today, but back
Well, they're
then,
known as dealerships.
they were dealerships. Yeah, yeah.
When did you get interested in drawing and artwork?
Oh, I started drawing when I was, I started in fine art, probably about 7 years old when I started, had like formal lessons. And so I had, my first art teacher was Madeline Lamar, Bandini Avenue, Riverside, California.
So you had formal lessons?
Oh God, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you was just a natural talent.
No, well, no. Yeah, no, formal lessons, and formal lessons, started doing original art at the grand old age of 8. I think my first, wouldn't call it a one-man show, one-boy show, was 9 years old. I still have some stuff here at the house that was done when I was, I think, 10. Yeah.
What kind of stuff were you drawing back then?
Madeline was a big fan of what's called plein air, which is art in the outdoors. So lots of landscape. We used to go down to San Pedro Harbor and draw ships. So I got a few of those around. It was fun.
So did you always do art as a career after you got through the automobile sales stuff, or what were you doing between and after that?
I really didn't. First of all, there's there wasn't then and isn't now a whole lot of money in it. And I really never thought of my art as anything other than avocation. You know, I didn't really look at it as a career thing at all. Yeah, no, the whole sports car art thing was pretty much an accident. It was not an intended thing. Yeah, I spent a better part of 40 years in advertising design and other creative. So.
And I see someone, Mitchell Landris, has got his Mitchell, you there?
Yeah, he's there.
How you doing? I'm here. This is a picture.
Hold up your artwork.
Yeah, I remember that car.
Yeah, we met in Princeton, New Jersey about 5 years ago.
That's right.
And you actually just finished up my friend's TR4A. You just finished up.
Yeah. In fact, I'm surprised it's not there already.
No, it has not come yet.
Well,
Listen, the mail is slow, as we all know.
yeah, it is. It's pretty slow right now.
So how does sports car art begin?
Ostensibly as a retirement project. So you can see how retired I am. I was doing some restoration decal stuff for a few high-end restorers and Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum and a few other, kind of high-end corporate clients. And I ran into a guy, Henry Kamisaska, who, in addition to owning Mabel, which is the Le Mans MGB GT, is a collector of photographs. And Henry had asked me if I would composite his photos of the GT that was cut in half and is at the British Heritage Museum. And I fooled around with him for a couple days, and it was pretty evident that that wasn't going to work because there were crazy angles and different lighting. And I called him up and said I didn't think it was going to happen, and it was being ghastly expensive, but I thought it'd make a hell of an illustration. So we struck a deal, and I kept the printing rights, and I did his GT drawing, and I think I printed 25 or 50 of them, something like that. I was hanging out on MG Experience, and I posted up and said, hey, I got 50 of these things, and I'm going to sell them for, I don't know what I was selling them for there, probably $65 or something like that. And if anybody wanted one, and I sold them all in like 3 hours. I was like, wow, that's kind of weird. And shortly after, I just started getting, requests to do other cars, and I really didn't treat it as much as art probably until probably the second year I was drawing stuff. I really kind of retrenched and stopped and kind of went back and thought, conceptually, what would it look like if I was going to do this? What would I, how would I draw the cars?
So were you still running, you had an advertising agency in Rutland at that time, right?
Yeah, I was just in the process of closing it down.
So how did you decide to go from the agency to drawing?
I started off, probably my first job was my first job out of college was working as an illustrator for a automotive accessory outfit. And then back in those days, it was still pens and markers and pencils and whatnot. And the process was, somebody would develop a set of product drawings, and they would come to the art department and say, render this. And I always, I loved it. I loved being able to bring that stuff to life and to do those things. And You know, probably like a lot of really long careers. You know, you start off kind of in one place, you end up in a different place. And, you know, there was not a lot of love in my business the last 4 or 5 years. You know, it was more just doing it because I needed to keep going. But I really wanted to get back to how I started, which was as an illustrator originally. And so when I decided to retire, that was what I was going to do. I didn't have a grand plan or anything beyond that. This sports car art's just sort of, well, it's grown really largely from customers. You know, people have asked, you know, can you do this or can you do that? And yeah.
Was that the MG? Was that your first commission then?
The first commission, my first commission was actually 1995. And if I can figure out, if you guide me to share my screen, I actually have it up.
You should be able to hit share screen if you.
Oh, I see share screen right there. Hang on. Host disable. Oh, I got you as disabling it.
Yeah, well, you know, let me see if I can make that happen.
Okay, buddy.
Or not.
We're not. I like your background, Rick.
Some hack artist made it. You should be able to share now.
All right, let's see what we got. There we go. Is that, hang on here, it's asking me to do something. Give me a second, gents.
I'd give you a hard time, but I don't suspect that I'll do any better than you will with this. So.
Well, I may end up having just to tell you about it. Oh, look at that. Is it going to let me do it? All right, let's see if we got it now. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yes, got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's actually 1995, and I was commissioned to do this. A friend of mine represented Penske, and got a hold of me. Knew that I was, you know, illustrating still, and got a hold of me and asked me to do this Gordon Johncock piece. I did, there were only 4 prints. I have the original, and then 3 prints. One went to Roger, one went to Gordon, and Greg kept the other one. And of course, I didn't know do-a-diddy about all the legal stuff surrounding, you know, what I do. So Greg actually locked up the rights to this for 25 years. And I just recently reclaimed them, which enabled me to reprint it. It's always been one of my most favorite pieces. It's I probably drag it around to every show I go to. Still love it. It's yeah, just something I really enjoy.
So
that's my first one.
How do you decide what to draw now?
By what pleases me, pretty much. You know, I like to draw cars that have good stories. You know, and ultimately, the richer the story, the better the art. There's a lot of cool cars out there that are just, you know, they got some interesting engineering, but I'm more interested in drawing stuff that has a great story behind it. Because ultimately, when you draw the car, you're you're retelling that story, and you're retelling not just the story of the metal bits and the rest of it, but you're retelling the story of the people who dreamed it, who designed it, who built it, who raced it. And so those are the cars that I'm most drawn to, that I want to illustrate.
How, this is an illustration. How did you decide to start doing cutaways?
After I'd done the rendering for Henry, I started really kind of thinking about, what would this look like if I had started from scratch? And I was pretty, when you're in creative as a business, you learn to make good, smart choices about, especially around the marketing of your creative. You try to be, you don't want to do what everybody else is doing, because you're going to be behind unless you think you can do it exponentially better. And I didn't really think I had anything to add to the traditional art community. It would be cheeky, would be a generous word, to think that a guy could start competing with somebody like David Kimball, who's been in the game for 50 years. Didn't seem real promising. And so I started doing a little research, and I found a German guy who'd been around for a couple of years, didn't do a whole lot of things, but was drawing in a style that's pretty close to what I do. He didn't have the advantage of, obviously, of being able to work in a digital environment, but I really thought his approach was really cool. The idea that you could see through the car rather than cutting away portions of it, and I started to develop that style.
So
it's come a long way in 10 years.
how do you, well, first of all, let me ask you, what was your first cutaway drawing?
The first real cutaway drawing?
Sure.
I think the first real cutaway I did, where I was doing the early technique, was early MGB. That was the very first one I did.
And how do you do that? How do you develop those Superman eyes to look through underneath the car and think what's under the skin?
Oh, geez, not to be a smart ass, but it's what I see in my head. And you see it in your head, and you start drawing. You draw what you want it to look like. It seems like kind of an odd explanation. The technical parts of it would make your eyes glaze over. So I won't do that. But I can show you kind of how it gets going. So I think you should have a little W113 up on your screen. You got that?
Yep.
Yeah. So all of them start kind of the same. I set the wheelbase. I start with a simple piece of line art, nothing fancy. Generally, the line art gives me the profile and, any character lines, things like that I know I'm going to have to draw. And you start working up from there. In the old days, when 5-6 years ago, my process was much like building a car. You'd build I'd actually start with the frame and the drivetrain, and build the car up from there. But now the technique is actually the reverse. I've found that I'm able to get a much better result by actually starting the outside. So now I actually draw the exteriors and a complete car, an opaque car. And then I work backwards to put in all the ingredients.
Yeah, you're doing this all on computer, right?
Yeah, but it's not exactly what you think. I mean, I'm still, well, can you see? There you go. I'm still using a pen. It's a stylus, but it's still a pen. And I have a set of them, not too many. And they're programmed to do, to give me various kinds of strokes so that I can kind of move along at a pretty good rate. So I'm still drawing by hand. I draw on obviously on a special screen, but yep. It's a little, it has some advantages and some disadvantages. There are things that you can do in analog that are simply faster. My head sort of thinks like that. But there are things that you can do in a digital environment that are impossible to do in analog. So, for instance, when Mitchell called me up and wanted to do his friend's TR4, and he needed it in red, and he needed it with X amount of equipment on it, that's really, you can do that in a digital environment. In a traditional print environment, you can't do that. Not at a price anybody will pay for it.
I noticed that we did the whip antenna on mine in the cherry bomb exhaust for my friend's car.
Yeah, I mean that's the stuff.
Remember, it's just spot on.
That's where the digital environment gives you such an enormous advantage, is that you're able to alter, edit or alter at will, and in fact, a huge portion of setting up the drawings has less to do with the more obvious skill of what stuff looks like and how to make things look realistic. There's more time and effort spent in how a drawing is organized. It's actually what's underneath it that is hard to do. Hard to understand how to build the drawing up in layers. And I can actually show you kind of. So here's one that's a little further along. So this is kind of like stage 2, if you will. So the Meisterbrowser Scarab from Augie Pabst that I'm drawing for them. And then it kind of moves in. I'm going to give you one that's pretty crazy. This is a pretty recent drawing. And I'm going to actually move. Whoops. I need this. That one's the one I need right there. So what you're going to end up seeing if you go all the way down to the bottom is this drawing has 156 separate layers. That doesn't include the engine, which is generally I build separately and then I bring them in. So the engine's about 125 individual layers of its own. And you can kind of see how the drawing is built up. If I go down here and I just start unclicking a whole bunch of stuff.
Wow, look at that.
You can kind of see how stuff gets built up. And keep going down here. You get a sense of how the thing's built, and if I go far enough, it'll go all the way back to
Do you take classes in computer drawing?
No, like a lot of this stuff, they didn't exist when I was starting, and so the digital drawing part's all self-taught. So you can see that this looks like more or less like the Scarab. It's kind of how they all start. And then from here, you start building stuff up. I generally start with the interiors and start drawing stuff. And yeah, so everything is drawn individually. every component's drawn in its own right. You know, so there's a.
Do most people send pictures of the cars when they want you to do a print?
Generally speaking, depends on the car. I mean, a lot of these cars I draw, I don't really need anything, you know, like, say like an E-type. You know, I've drawn about 100 and, well, no, I don't know where I'm at, about 118 of them. There's really not, I mean, every now and then something unusual, but for the most part, you know, cars like that, they're pretty straight up. And by now, you know, I've drawn, like, especially on British cars, you know, they're sort of the, you know, the original, I was going to say kit car, but it's probably not the right phrasing. But, you know, a lot of the parts were sourced from the same people. You know, a Lucas alternator that's on a 1972 whatever is going to be the same Lucas alternator that's on a 1972 something else that's British. So
For example, when you did my Healy,
yeah,
which has a lot of I'm gonna say specialty things on it.
Yeah.
You actually need the actual photograph in order to do that. Like my hardtop has the emblem on it, the Nerf bars in the rear, the driving lights in the front.
Yeah, but all that stuff I keep. So I actually have a virtual parts bin that is over the years now filled with several types of, say, Lucas fog lamps. I've got everything from 576s right up to the new ones. And so I keep all that stuff because, as I said, you know, it's you're going to see it on another car at another time. Gotcha. Same thing with all the big components, transmissions. You know, you draw one, you keep it. And, you know, a C4, for instance, is a C4. No matter what car it's in, doesn't change. It's still a C4. So you can save yourself a lot of time and effort, you know, simply by being, you know, careful about what you keep.
So David, when you did Donald Healy's coupe, that Tom Webster showed up, I've got it as well. How'd you do that, considering that's one of one?
A lot of these cars like that, I end up working with people that have restored them or have personal knowledge. I do a lot of institutional work. So a good example is the Gurney Eagle, the F1 car from 1967. I actually collaborated with Rebs Institute in order to get the technical information that I needed to draw the car accurately. Or, you know, in the case of the GT40, I was able to work, you know, with the Henry Ford Museum. So a lot of times on special cars like the coupe, I actually got to work with a guy. I did a little bit of work with David Matthews over in the UK, who actually pointed me to a guy down in Australia who had at one time, I guess, owned the second car. So, you know, a lot of this stuff, and a lot of times the research work is more fun and fascinating than the actual drawing. You get to work with some really cool people, and you know, the Scarab is a great example. I mean, my chances of ever meeting Augie Pabst before that car came up were someplace between 0 and none. So just not, you know, it's just not going to happen. But I got a request to draw the car from a guy who owns one of them and lived in Scottsdale and was friends with Augie. And next thing I know, bang, I'm drawing the car. I just finished working with some guys on the TR250K. Really cool car, and a lot of fun to draw it on the Group 44 cars. I've been privileged to work with a number of the guys who actually were on the team, who knew the cars really intimately, and so yeah, that's probably the most fun. The most fun is being able to collaborate with you know, guys that were your heroes.
Go back to the 250K for a second. Who
Yeah.
drew that? Who drew that? Describe the car, and who did you meet?
Oh, the TR 250K. I don't have that up, unfortunately. Well, I got to meet Tony Garmy, who is the guy who currently actually races the car, which I thought was, pretty awesome. The guy I got to work with on, actually the guy I got to work with the most was Peter Brock, who designed the car. And I met Peter when I was asked to draw the Cobra Daytona by Justin Gurney. So, yeah, I've met some incredible people, just incredible. I mean, it's been a really rich experience just meeting some of these guys. I said I'd probably never have that opportunity in any other way. Pretty cool. So,
What do you think sets your art apart from other motor vehicle or motor artists?
there are about 6 living cutaway artists in the United States right now. All of them, except me, all practice a very traditional style cutaway. So I think what sets me apart is the unique style, and it's and how it's developed. It's the flexibility of it. Most of the cutaway guys, they draw what they draw. What makes this unique is like for Mitchell, when he ordered his friend's TR4 print, he was able to say, hey, I want X, Y, and Z, and he gets that. I dare say that if you were able to get David Kimball to draw your car, you would get the car exactly how David Kimball wanted you to have it. End of story. So I think what sets me apart is my willingness and capacity to be able to draw the car the way you want to see it.
I've noticed your chrome work seems different than in other renderings. How's that?
It is. It's one of those things where my experience, my mechanical experience and my restoration experience informs my art. That's the other thing. Without a knowledge of how this stuff works, if you don't know how cars work, you can't do what I do. Bottom line, you can draw. You could be a hell of an illustrator, but if you don't understand how the parts work, it will not look the same, because you won't understand the relationships or how to make them work.
Would you call this more of a passion than a job?
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You ain't doing this for the money, bud. I could be flipping burgers at McDonald's making better bucks.
Did you develop a different process for your chrome?
Yeah, I mean, and even today it's evolved quite a lot, but the chrome is actually done not very unlike real chrome. You start off, there's actually 3 distinct layers on mine. You have a copper layer, which is kind of your base. And then I add to that kind of a silver layer, which, emulates the nickel. And then I have a highlight layer that goes over top of it that has some blues in it and some rust colors and whatnot that emulates the chrome layer. So the chrome parts are actually built up, well, pretty much like you chrome a part. It's not much different. It's just I do it in a virtual world.
What was your favorite car to draw?
Ah, God, I was dreading this question. It's like saying, what's your favorite child? The political answer is, no, they're all the same.
That was the Donald Healy answer. Whenever anybody asked him what the favorite car was, he'd always ask you what you had first, and then oh, that was my favorite car,
Yeah. I think the car that challenged me the most was the Cobra Daytona.
Why was that?
Well, part of it is because cars of that era, especially race cars, I mean, they were race cars. They were tools. They weren't important. So when their lives were over, no one really, who cares? It's a race car. It was cannibalized for parts, and there wasn't a lot of photographic record. Nobody really thought about it. It just wasn't critical. Even until the 70s, it was just not important stuff. And of course, the research on the cars is what makes the art great. So the challenge with the Cobra was really drawing the car authentic in how it was in 1967. And you got to remember that the guys that were there, like the Peter Brocks of this world, are not young men. And I don't think he would begrudge me that, to say that memories aren't nearly that sharp right now. So when you're trying to draw something, a great deal of which you just have to imagine, and you have to depend on your mechanical knowledge to know how things are supposed to go together, it challenges you. But I find that's a lot of fun. It's can drive you crazy, but it's a lot of fun. So I'd say the Daytona is probably hands down the most satisfying one to draw.
Yep.
So far.
Was there anything you really hated drawing?
Oh my. Actually, no. Nothing I really hated drawing. Because I just, I don't have time for that. This is a pretty much a self-indulgent activity. So I draw what pleases me.
Anybody, all your cars are pristine examples. Did anyone ever ask you to do a patinated car with rust spots and crappy paint and any of that stuff?
No, but I did get asked by a British car owner if I would be kind enough to put an oil spot underneath it. I declined. I think the other car that, if you want to talk about cars I really enjoyed drawing, the BMW 507 definitely is at the top of my list of cars I really, really had a lot of fun with. And in part, I think the cars that I probably enjoyed drawing the most are the ones where I was able to push the technique beyond what I had been doing, where I had to invent new ways to do things to make it look the way I wanted it to look. So those are the ones that really sing.
We're familiar with your wall art. How big a drawing or how big an illustration is the largest size you've done?
I have a number of life-size pieces out there. Life-size pieces are actually sublimated onto fabric, and so the Gurney Eagle and the GT40 are at All American Racers in Costa Mesa, and those are life-size examples. So full-size cars, I think it's a 196-inch canvas, if I remember right. It's pretty incredible to see because the illustrations I do are what are called vector art. There's no degradation. You could make it as big as your house and it would look just as sharp.
No distortions.
No distortion. Zero.
Unbelievable.
It's pretty amazing. The first one I ever saw done on fabric was the Cunningham Jaguar Lightweight from Le Mans, and I was really flabbergasted. It was an amazing experience to see it.
Have you ever done collages of multiple cars that people have in their collections?
I've been asked. I haven't really spent enough time playing with it to come up with the result that I'd be happy with. So I've pretty much declined.
Well, you better start practicing.
Shit. I actually have two new things that I'm working on, which unfortunately I can't disclose, but I'm actually working on some art that does not look like what you currently see. It's still cars, just a different take. Yeah.
When are you going to finally
and when are you going to release it?
Probably going to have one sometime by springtime. I'll have one of the ideas ready. I've actually already been working in a process called lenticular printing. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but if you guys live in any kind of near metro areas and go by a bus stop, for instance, and on the end card, maybe you walk past it and the guy is on the skateboard and he jumps over the rail, and so the image changes as you move through it. Mm-hmm. And that's it's actually a process from the 40s. And I work in collaboration with a photographer named Bill Pack, and he provides the exterior shots and I provide all the innards. And in our lenticular examples, when you see the image from one angle, you see a car, opaque car. And as you move across the image, the insides reveal themselves until you get to the other side of the car, and then you get the whole effect. So it's pretty incredible stuff. How
have you marketed your work?
Events are a big piece of selling it. Because as most of you guys realize, what it looks like on the screen and what it looks like in person are not the same things.
Well, it looks familiar, but not quite the same one, but it looks familiar.
Yeah, that's a TR5, but
right.
Yeah, well, it looks a lot like the TR4, Mitchell. Yep. Pretty close.
I was going to say, where's the whip 10 in the mirrors and the cherry bomb?
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, this is actually a TR5 for a guy up in Michigan. So most of it's event-based sales. People want to see the art. It's just different than seeing it on a computer screen. You see it in person, and I think everybody that's on the call that owns my art would probably vouch for the fact that it's way better in person.
I was totally impressed when I met you that day.
Thank you.
And actually, I ordered it that day with you also, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you did indeed. You did indeed. Yep. So events are a big deal. I market through my website, obviously, and do a bit with social media on Facebook.
How has COVID affected your ability to go to shows?
Well, it was my first summer off in 10 years. So no events, 0 events. It hurt art sales pretty bad. I mean, I'm still selling some, but events are 40% of my income. It's a big chunk. Amelia Island is, you do $20,000 with Amelia Island.
That's a lot.
At an event, you miss an event like that, it puts a pretty big hole in things. On the other hand, I also don't have the expenses. So,
David, can I ask a question?
Fire away.
Like for instance, the illustration you just showed of the Triumph TR5. Suppose somebody sees that, they've got one that's a TR5, but it is British Racing green. Is it very easy for you to take that and just layer, one of your layers now becomes the color layer, you change it to British Racing green, you got another printing, and
that is correct.
Okay, cool.
So that was kind of, I alluded to that when I was talking about the file setup for these. So a big piece of a big part of the challenge is being able to set prints up so that the variables, color, tires, wheels, so that all that stuff can be changed pretty rapidly. It takes about 135 to 150 hours to build the base art. So, you know, just thinking about how you monetize that. You know, so this is the business end of how this all works. You know, you can't do that, you know, for $329, you know, for the next guy and expect to be around doing it for very long. So you have to, you know, a big part of how you do this has to be, you know, how do you solve that problem? And you solve that problem by putting a file setup together that allows you to make those changes pretty rapidly.
And you always use Adobe Illustrator?
I have, yeah.
I know I use AutoCAD, and tell you the truth, when I get over 5 layers, I'm done. So I can understand what you're going through. Wow.
Well, the Cobra Daytona had over 250.
Amazing.
It was crazy. Trying to keep track of that was pretty amazing. So.
Anyone else have any questions for David?
That's it. So, at some point, if you ever want to see a full-size version of a car,
Yes.
that I've done, when there's a new exhibit coming to the Smithsonian's Air and Space called Nation of Speed, and in that exhibit will be a full-size version of the Group 44 TR4A. So it's actually part of the National Air and Space. Full size. It'll be pretty cool. So
I got a question
coming
for
soon.
you.
What's that?
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
What does that mean to you?
Doing them doggy styles. Oh my God. We almost drove off the road when we saw that sign. Mr. Neville has been my, he's been my willing companion on a number of event adventures. Several trips to Pittsburgh for the Grand Prix there. And coming back from Pittsburgh, I think this was last time we went.
Yeah.
We decided to go the southern route and then cut across to pick up the north just for the sake of some variance. And we ran across this sign on the way and literally couldn't believe it. So Mr. Neville was quick and took a picture doing them doggy styles. Jesus.
It was a very, very warm Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix. I think it was into the hundreds every day.
Oh my God.
It was absolutely miserable.
It was, but it's always been good for sales.
It has been.
What's that?
It has been.
It has been. It's always.
Of course, you know, sometimes that sale money goes to buying new tires and wheels and that kind of thing, but you know.
It does. So.
David has generously made an offer to offer a discount if you've always wanted some of his work or more of his work. And he can tell you what the discount offer is. And if you would like to partake of this offer, send me an email to healyrick@yahoo.com and tell me your name and do it the next hour so I know this doesn't get passed around to anyone else. And you might get a special bonus out of this. So David?
Healy
Yeah,
Rick, what's the email address again?
Healy Rick, HEALEYRICK @yahoo.com.
Okay. I'm going to put a coupon up in the morning. And when Rick gets your email, I'll actually send you the coupon code. And that's going to be for 25% off on the limited edition signed work. I can't, unfortunately, on the open edition stuff, there's at 25%, I'd have to have the printer pay me to do it. But you know, there's a little bit of room to play. So for tolerating me for the last 45 minutes, you get a pretty good deal, and that'll save you a chunk of money. I'll save you about $70. So it's yeah, just by way of thanks. I mean, when I started, I did a ton of club events because they were available to me, and unfortunately, you know, the economics of how the business of art works, in order to make it financially viable, I kept having to move up, you know, to bigger shows and bigger shows and bigger shows. So I don't do too many club events anymore, maybe a couple a year or so. But I always enjoyed them because they were a lot of fun and really loved the camaraderie, you know, being around the car guys. The bigger shows are obviously more financially viable, but they're more entertainment and less about, you know, less about the cars. Part of the biz. Got to do it.
Okay, Rick, I already emailed you, so look out for that.
I will. I want to mention too that that I will move out of the way, but that is one of.
There you go.
Was that 104?
No, that is the Jackie Cooper 100S.
Yeah.
That was done for our founding president to own that car. It was AHS 3504 when Bill Wood owned it, and we presented it to him on the 40th anniversary of our club, and David was kind enough to do that, and it turns out to be my favorite illustration of his. So I would like to thank. So David, I want to thank you very much for
Hold on,
taking
Rick,
the
I got
time
a question
to
for you, Rick.
Pardon me?
Are there any Healy clubs on Long Island?
We cover Long Island as far as I know, don't we?
I don't know. I'm asking you because I have a 1960 Mark I.
Yeah.
As you saw already the picture.
We do have some Long Island members, and I think the Austin-Healey Sports and Touring Club does the same. I think they also cover Long Island. So
Can you send me the links on those via my email?
sure,
Appreciate it.
be happy to. Anyone else have anything? Otherwise, we're going to sign off.
Well, Dave, as soon as I get my picture in, I will let you know.
That would be great. I always like to know when they arrive.
Yes, that's why I contacted you last week, saying, where are we? But it's okay. My friend's birthday is in December, so that's why I gave myself plenty of leeway.
Even the post office can't screw that up. Well, wait. Maybe. Although I have to say, in 10 years, USPS has only lost 2 prints.
That's not bad.
No, that's incredible. Yeah, they've only actually lost 2. So that's not a bad record for all of them.
Were they ever found, David, or are they gone in for good?
One was found, was actually sent to a guy in Europe that I drew quite a bit for. And it turned out that the postal worker was copying them. And so when I sent the replacement, he figured, well, I was good for 1, I'm going for 2. And the other one wasn't exactly, well, it was lost, but it got found. It was actually sent to the guy, Andrew Uppershard, that owns the TR5 that I was showing. It was a different car, and I sent it to him, and 2 months later, the tracking never showed it moving past wherever the clearinghouse up in the Midwest was. So as it turned out, they did turn the print up, and it was just destroyed. And apparently what had happened is the postal worker had slammed the tube in the sliding door of the postal truck and didn't want to own up to the fact that he destroyed the print. But they eventually found it, and yeah, it was wrecked. But those are the only 2 that I know of that have actually ever been lost. So
Well,
They have a pretty good record of delivering. They're not, you know, two-day priority actually means someplace between 5 and 6. That's real. That's real. So, but it is what it is. You know, that's the other thing. It's just hard to send big art, you know, because I print on metal too. I mean, I do a lot of brushed aluminum prints, and they're pretty good size. You know, 47-inch print is not cheap to send. So there's a lot of challenges to this art, most of which don't have anything to do with drawing. It all has to do with how you get it to your customer and, you know, how you tell people about what you do. So.
How long does it take you to do one from start to finish?
About 135 to 150 hours for base artwork. This is not a fast process.
So like you did my friend's TR4, my Healy. How long did that take you to complete? No.
Yeah, a couple hours by the time I rendered, you know, took the base artwork and made the changes.
Okay.
And things like Healy's, you know, like a Healy today, I don't know. You know, depending on how crazy it is, you know, you can go in and change the color and change wheels and tires and all that in probably less than an hour and be done. But that's experience, you know. I mean, it's every color that you draw comes across differently. So if I do a yellow Sprite for Peter, you know, and I do a dark green one for somebody else, the color balance is completely different. You know, it's the highlights are different, the shadows are different. It all changes because the depth and, you know, the depth of the colors are so different. And again, this is where setting the art up correctly that's really the ticket. If otherwise, because when I was doing it in the beginning, it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. It would take forever to do this stuff. You know, and it's really, a lot of the technique has less to do with the drawing skills and more to do with the technicality of how do you make this, how do you make it doable? How do you make it doable and economically feasible? So, and I love that. I love that part.
Now, David, you had the Chaparral print. Was that one of your first, like, that's a freehand kind of style? Do you do any of that anymore?
I do, but mostly just for fun.
Fun?
Total fun. Okay. I mean, do a lot of poster art for events. I think, you know, the Show of Dreams up our way, my home club, I do all their poster art for them. And I do poster art for a number of other larger events around the country. But you can't sell it, you know. I've had that Penske print forever and just doesn't sell. I love it, but it doesn't sell. You know, what sells is what I do. So, you know,
Well, I'm gonna have to talk you to doing collage for me.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want a collage, I got to tell you, man, I got an artist for you, but Heidi's big bucks.
Well, I'm gonna take a picture of one I have of something else and see if you could do that with the cars. That's how I think I'm gonna approach it.
All right. Is that one in the background I see back there with all the cars up in it?
That's the picture of Donald Healy print over there. Well, it was Healy's.
Yeah.
That's an MGTC at 3000. My father's bug-eyed Sprite up in the corner over there for 19.
Oh, look at all this.
What about that?
All right, I got another Healy print over here. I got a lot of Healy stuff in my
It's all
office.
cars.
Healy's at MGA's.
Hey, can't go wrong.
And my Corvette. I have to throw American in there.
Leakers all. Leakers all.
Very true, very true. That's because they don't rust out, because they're all covered with oil.
Own stock in Castrol if you own those cars, Bob.
I've had them a long time already. I had the Healy 28 years and the MG 30 years now.
Oh, wow.
They're not going anywhere.
There you go.
All right, folks, that's going to be it for this evening. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you again, David. Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, David.
Great
When's the
job,
next
David.
one?
Hey, appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
When's the next one going to
Thanks
be?
for sharing.
Thank you, you bet.
Good night.
Right.
Thank you.